Grief is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome back to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode brings real conversations with people from around the world who have navigated profound loss and found the strength to rebuild their lives with courage and intention. Together, we'll explore what it means to move from survival to integration, to reclaim your identity, honor your grief journey, and create a future grounded in resilience and purpose. Walk with us as we transform grief into growth, one story at a time. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to invite you guys over to empowergriefjourney.com where you can explore past podcast episodes, grab a copy of your Empower Grief Journey anthology, and book a free grief clarity call to begin your own Empower Grief Journey. Today, I have a special guest with us. Her name is Lezlee Liljenberg. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, author, former commercial real estate broker who built a multi-million-dollar insurance agency from the ground up before transitioning into consulting as an expert witness. Beyond her professional success, Lezlee is on a deeply personal mission. After years of unanswered questions about her past, a DNA test led her on a life-changing journey to uncover the true biological family. Since 2021, she has navigated the complexities of identity, connection, and belonging, experiencing both heartbreak and profound acceptance along the way. Through her book and her work, If You Only Knew, A DNA Journey, Lezlee shares her story of love, loss, and truth to remind others that they're not alone, especially those navigating unexpected DNA discoveries. She believes it's never too late to uncover who you are and step into a new chapter of your life. And so, without further ado, guys, I want to introduce Lezlee onto the show. Lezlee, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a pleasure because we were able to talk a few weeks ago, I guess about a week ago, and now we're back together. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation around grief
Mhm.
because the study of DNA and ancestry websites that are helping us trace back our roots and our family has opened up a lot of doors for people who've been adopted and even people who haven't been adopted to learn their family genealogy of where they came from. And I know a lot of times there's many situations in this in families, but the box of DNA journey sometimes opens up Pandora's box, and we don't truly know what to expect or what we might stumble across and how that impacts us. I wanted you to share with listeners as we get started. What was that story like for you as you explored that journey?
Well, I mean, as like many people, many people take the DNA test for fun. Some people are really, I tend to stay away from the fact of everybody's trying to just find their medical background because I think there's so much more to it. But it is an important part and piece of people taking the DNA testing. But for us, for my family, we were just doing it for fun. And I may have shared it with you, and I share it in the book. My husband looks just like Paul McCartney. So with us, my mom, my brother, my husband, and I all were like, let's do this Christmas and let's have fun with it. And, we laughingly said he was going to be Paul McCartney's love child and just got a kick out of it. And so, but when we took the test, I ended up being the outlier. And what I mean by that is my my test came back 28% Scandinavian, which was a shock because, and then with my brother had zero Scandinavian and my mother had zero Scandinavian. That really threw us off because we didn't get too crazy about it. And I'm talking, this was probably 12 years ago, even maybe longer when we took it. So we didn't think much about it because we were really like many people. Oh, the technology is just not there. It's just, that's, they've got something mixed up in the research lab. That you hear that a lot. So we went that direction a little bit, and I think we just kind of ignored it and went on. And but then things continued on in my life where I found out more things and was asking questions, and things that were said to me really sparked my curiosity and led me to keep on going and asking questions.
What was it like when you saw that 28% Scandinavian, but your mom and your brother didn't have it? What kind of clues did that tip off for you, or what did that make you question?
Well, it made me, I think like I said, was kind of like we were all a little bit confused, and I look so much like my mom that it was one of those moments like, well, this can't even be right. There's something wrong with this. But I think it was the beginning for me of starting to ask the questions. And at the time, too, my niece, who was, oh my gosh, she was probably, so I would have probably been about 42. She was just really young. And when it came back, she's the one that said, Aunt Leslie, something's not right. We're showing up as first cousins, which was, I was like, well, that can't be true. That's not, so that was more like it solidified to me that something wasn't right because I knew nothing about what a centimorgan is. And we can talk about that if you want, but I had no clue what any of this was about. So when she brought it up to me, just what I did was, well, that okay, then there must be something wrong because I am your aunt and I'm not your first cousin. So that also sparked some questions. Those I it didn't at the time, but as time went on and I learned more about DNA testing and what it looked like and how those results appear, then it made more sense. But it wasn't until much later that the pieces started fitting together.
And what did that look like when the pieces started coming together? How did that change, maybe ideologies you had around your family and who was lined up with who? Did that make a change for you that was eye-opening, or did it confirm certain things that you've known about your family?
Well, I always say that when I had my discovery, so many people it's hurtful. I'm not saying it's not hurtful because it is, but for me, it was a relief. I Everybody always likes, how did you feel? And for me, in the moment, it was a relief. But my discovery and my learning didn't come until I was probably, I'm 62 now, so I was right at 57, 58 years old when my brother and I took 23andMe. We knew we weren't connecting exactly the same, but we didn't quite understand the numbers and what it looked like. And my brother asked me to take 23andMe, and that is when the final discovery, after I'd gone through so many things, excuse me, I'd gone through so many things that were throwing up these issues, and I was going back and I was questioning my mother and saying, Mom, this doesn't make sense. This person is saying this to me. And she would say, oh, that's just silly. And there's a chapter in my book about that, about gaslighting. And my mom she had lived the life for so long that, and I have nothing against my mom about this at all. She did what she had to do and she protected me, and I love her for that. But I was hurt because I'd been asking so many questions for so many years, and she was just kind of, she was gaslighting me. She was just blowing it off and not listening to me. So when I finally realized, and that 23andMe results came up, and my brother and I are half siblings, that was just such a relief because I felt like I wasn't crazy. I was being treated like I was crazy, and I was being treated like I shouldn't ask questions. And that was very, very difficult. And that was probably more my grieving process at that point in time because I did grieve. I spent a lot of time grieving because I felt like I had been deceived, and I had been lied to. And it was very hurtful because my mother and I were very, very close. I mean, it's like sometimes I feel like we grew up together because she was young when she had us. But I was, but on the flip side, one of the sweetest, dearest things my brother said to me was, this doesn't change anything. You are my sister. And those types of things are the sweetest things that people can say to people that are going through it, because we know we're kind of changing, but we also don't want it to change for them. So I had my cousins that I grew up with. I had, all sorts of relatives that said it makes no difference. Some of them won't talk about it. They're nervous to talk about it, but many people will. And even, my niece, and it just didn't change anything from that standpoint, because I don't believe that blood is thicker than water. I think love is stronger than anything. And when you love someone, you can help them through it. But I will say, most people, many of the people in my family, they get it, they understand it, but they just don't know how to address it. And I think that goes along with what we're talking about in grieving process. When somebody loses someone, it's kind of a loss, and it's a loss for them too, because it's a change for them. And I just think people they're afraid to address it because they don't know how it's going to affect you as that person that has made this discovery or has had this loss. And Really, it's kind of the same as when you've lost a family member, or you've lost somebody that you love or something that you care about. Um, it's sometimes it's hard for people to know how to address it and to approach it. That was a
Yeah,
long answer for that, but I was
no, no, that's a great thing, by the way, because you brought up a lot of topics around this that it's hurtful, number one, and you brought up the thing that I really love that you acknowledge is that people are not sure how to respond to that. And
right,
I can gather an idea in a sense of if you lived your whole life, you did this at 57, so you lived a long, long life with the story and the narrative and belief of these are my family, this is part of my clan that I'm part of. And then when you take a test like that and it flips that narrative upside down, you start to go, well, was that really true? Or what, was I actually part of something else? Did my mom tell me the truth about things, or did she protect me from something that I didn't know about? And all of a sudden, this whole narrative that you've built and your life around just collapses all of a sudden. And now, that's a big part of grief that I talk about all the time is that grief isn't always this outward expression of hurt and pain, but it's an identity shift sometimes. And
right,
especially when you start going down 23andMe situations, looking at things, you start to suddenly all find out that you had relatives and family, blood connected to you that you never knew about sometimes. And you can, I'll give you a good example. My grandmother found out, I think 15 years ago now, somewhere in that ballpark, that her mom had a child back in the day, but didn't tell anybody about it. And so
yeah,
they found out there was this 82-year-old Norwegian guy halfway across the world that was related to them.
wow.
And I'll never forget my grandmother going up to my great grandmother's headstone at the cemetery, and she went, "Bad woman." And I was like, whoa, like,
Oh, whoa.
but that to your point though, my grandma never knew that she had a brother her whole
Yeah.
life for 80 years and didn't know.
Well,
So
I mean, gosh, when you got pregnant out of wedlock, I mean, or anything. I mean, women were just treated so badly, and they didn't have choices many times. I mean, the child was just taken away from them in many situations, and they didn't have a choice. Then you look at, like, I was born in 1963, so birth control wasn't even legal. So when we try to understand the concept, and we understand our grandparents feel that way, or our great grandparents feel that way, they're bad person. But truly, I mean, yes, it's generationally different, but at the same time, we still kind of look at people that way. I mean, I think sometimes, I think we're becoming more evolved in our society, but at the same time, there's still this stigma that is associated to being pregnant out of wedlock, or not being able to afford to have a child and to raise it. So, there's so many stories of throughout all this, and so many people are discovering these truths that they grew up with somebody that they thought was their sister, but it was really their mother, and everybody kept it a secret. So that it just we're still dealing with it. I think the greatest thing about it, though, are their stories like my story, and thousands of people that we're learning that these things happen. And it does not mean that you love anybody less. It doesn't mean, people ask me all the time about, I'm mad at my mom. They say I'm mad at my I am not mad at my mother. And I make that very clear in my book and anything that I talk about. I'm blessed to have had my mom, and that she barely had a high school education. She found a way, and she found a way to survive. And that's what I have to appreciate. There are still people in this world placed for adoption, and that's a beautiful thing too. And I'm going to touch on that just a little bit, because I think there's some really negative things going on in the adoption world right now. And there are many people that are adopted that have taken this attitude of, well, you would have just been better off not being adopted. And I just go, wow, how can you say that when there's so many people in this world, one, that long to have a child and are unable to? You and I have talked about that. But then also, people that have to make a really, really hard decision, what's best for the child. So I don't think we can ignore those things, or just take one avenue and stick to that one piece of the road and say this is the only way it is, because life is not black and white. There is so much gray. And I think we have to appreciate that within ourselves, but within, our own families and our relationships.
Well, that's what's so hard for many people to go down this road is, we're first off, we're humans. We have emotion, and I don't care who you are, you're going to feel angry, sad, overwhelmed, all these things in life. It's going to happen. But back to your point, I think it's bringing us to a place where we need to be more compassionate and understanding. I laughed when my grandma reacted the way I did. I don't blame her, honestly.
It's
She has a
funny.
right to feel that way. But,
Yes.
what was cool about, what came after that was they did find this person and somehow ended
Mhm.
up talking to him or sending letters. And, so I try to say, even with that adoption, you said somebody saying they'd be better off if you weren't adopted. We're not valuing human life as we should. And
Right.
everybody that walks this planet deserves to be loved and included in community. It's our human species genome process that we belong to community. And communities can be family or friends or people around us. It doesn't matter the title of that. But it just means that we want to feel important. We want to feel like we belong. And everybody deserves
We want
that.
to be needed and cared for. I mean, I like that what you just said. That's a lot of it's just belonging, and that's so much what people that do have the DNA discoveries is that they like, where do I belong now? Well, you still really belong where you were, where you grew up, and you're still part of that. It's just that now you have a different piece of the puzzle and a different part. And I mean, for me, my situation was not positive. I had two half sisters who have siblings and two first cousins that live right in the area, and I mean they're right down the street from me, and absolutely refused to meet me. Still to this day, there which they have no founding, no reason to feel that way. And but they do, and that they have to own that, and they do own it, and that's their walk. And I understand that. I've never tried to push myself on them. Does it hurt? Does it upset me at times? It did then. It doesn't really now. I really, on my journey, I want the positive. Do I deal only with positive? No. I listen to a lot of stories and I help a lot of people that are dealing with the negative, but it's how we react and what we do with it that moves us forward and what it's going to look like for our future. And it's like anything in life. If you decide that you're going to be angry and you decide you're only going to be pissed off about something and you decide that it's only going to be one way and you're going to stay hurt, you're going to stay in it. And that's really not what any of us need to do. We need to move forward, and that looks differently for everybody. But moving forward is the only way, or you're going to be stuck in the past, and really it's kind of not your past, it's your future to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us struggle with that because we don't
Mhm.
get the resources or have the support or people around us that want to actually be there to walk us through or help us through situations. I mean,
Right.
that comes back to that piece of human belonging, when we are left on our own in many ways, alone in grief, especially, or even if you took a DNA test, by the way, and found out something crazy like your dad that you grew up with for 20 years, not actually your dad. That's this guy over here. It just twists that story and that narrative in your brain in a very painful way sometimes to say, well, my whole reality might be false or my whole reality was built on this story. And then you find out, that maybe, I can say that might go one of two ways. You might find out your biological father wants nothing to do with you, never did in the first
Exactly.
place. And that can be really, really hurtful on top of what you just found out. Or you end up in the opposite situation where you reconnect and that biological father says, I've always wanted to meet you. I'm open to have some kind of relationship, whether that's having coffee twice a month or an ongoing thing, whatever that takes form in. So to your point, if we always live in that negative and that fear space of I don't want to know or this is going to cause me pain or hurt or I'm going to be hurt and we live there all the time, well, our future will be the same because we're never giving ourselves the opportunity to know what that is.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's exactly right because people, and yet I definitely respect people that, I was speaking at an event a couple of weeks ago, and like, there was a friend woman. She says, I don't want to know. I don't want to know that man. I don't want to know him. I don't want, there was a sister that had reached out that had found her. And, I was like, and so I'm curious, like, well, why? But I'm also not going to question because at the same time, I do know that there are very negative situations, and if it was an abusive parent, perhaps, or it was a really bad situation growing up, they don't want to open that door again. And I totally get that. I mean, some people have just gone through so much trauma in their lives that reopening that door that they've healed from or they've tried to heal and they've moved on, sometimes that's not a door people want to open, and maybe they shouldn't even open it, because we have to respect each person and what they've been through, and that may even be a drama that they don't want to recreate or go back in time, and they may not want to have that discussion with that new sibling. I respect that. I really do. And so I don't know what my biological father was like. He may have been a real jerk. I don't know. And I've never been told any differently. He passed away in 2000, and of course I didn't find out about him until basically 2021, 2022. The one thing that did come out of that, and again, I didn't go looking for the medical side of it, but when I did find him, I did find out that he passed away of leukemia at the age of 60, which was really important for me because though I wasn't looking for those medical results, it was important to me because I didn't have anybody in my life that had leukemia. So now I'm able to kind of rewrite my medical when I do go in, or if something happens to me or I'm sick and we can't quite diagnose it, I've got a different dialogue with the doctors and the medical field, and the people in the medical field. So it is important, and we should understand our genes, and there are organizations out there. One of them is called Right to Know. I'm not real involved in it, but I do know that they support the right to know. You have a right to know your past. So, and a lot of that comes with even sperm donor children, egg donor children, surrogacy, those types of things where, and even in an adoption world, things have been sometimes get turned upside down because the name that has been given to the adoptive parents as the biological parents, if that follows, they may have the wrong name of the people. So biological names, wrong names have been given to adoptive parents. And so that's opening a whole nother can of worms because everybody thought they had the answers, and it wasn't the right answer. It wasn't the same answer as they thought. So there's a lot going on, that's coming out of the DNA testing. That's not just about, oops, a surprise, but there's many other things that are happening in that whole realm.
What are some things that you would share with people who maybe want to explore something like 23andMe, but are just not sure if it's the right thing for them, or fearful of what may come out of that? What are some helpful things that you would share that could have a conversation with them about to help them make that decision?
Well, I always try and help people understand and be prepared, because you could find a surprise. Don't and at that point, if you do get a surprise, and I do write about this, it is that person's journey, and not everybody wants to find out and move forward with it. A lot of people do, but many people will often wait until after their parents have passed away so that they don't affect that parent. Me, I already knew something was askew, and so I was already asking my mom questions.
Mm.
So, but because we were so close and we were not estranged, I I was comfortable asking her, so I did. But she roadblocked me and she sent me down many rabbit holes, I will promise you. But it's my first thing is always it's your journey, and it's up to you if you have a surprise of how you want to move forward. For me, I had to move forward. I needed to reach out to people. It didn't always turn out the way I wanted it to, but that's life. You don't get it the way you want it to all look and rosy and peaches. Um but be prepared. That's my first thing, is be prepared. You might find a surprise. I always kind of laugh at people. I get tickled at people that say, "Oh, well, I know who my dad is. I know who my mom is." Well, I did too. So that's kind of, I don't know if I get annoyed with that kind of behavior sometimes, but I'm like, well, we all of us that had a surprise thought we knew what our lineage was. So I always, say be prepared. And if you don't want to know the truth, you might not want to go and take the test because it happens a lot. But then I will also say it's also kind of fun. And if you ever had any questions and you were in question about something or something wasn't quite right, it is a point of relief. It was for me. And yes, again, I always say I'm not, I've shed my tears. This was not easy. And you and I were talking the other day and I just started crying over the smallest thing, but it still hurts. It's still a change in your life, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be all bad. And so you have to open your heart and you have to be willing to accept the good, the bad, and the ugly because there's a little bit of all of that usually when you've had a discovery. Um, and I don't know what else I would really say to anyone. I got for me, I just say don't be afraid, but I'm not a very fearful person, so I didn't mind taking the risk.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, it's just that unknown, and we're just not
Mhm.
sure how we're going to respond or how we're going to deal with something that we find out that we may not like. And I think
Yeah,
that, the hard part of our life is with the way society is nowadays is we always focus on the positive and the happiness and the brightness, and we always focus over there. And this over here, the darkness is always there. We just don't
yeah,
choose to focus on it. But we also, by the way, because we don't focus on it, we don't know how to deal with it when it comes out. So we either deal with it really poorly or we deal with a lot of anger and frustration and blame and things like that. And so I do
yeah,
think that if we were allowed to give ourselves an opportunity to say, this does exist over here, it may or may not be bad, we don't know. And before,
right.
making judgments or assumptions, give ourselves that chance to know. I will say that, growing up, I didn't really know who my dad is. I've never met my dad ever in my life. And
Okay.
my mother only said, negative things about him, but that's her experience and it is what it is. But,
Yeah.
I did end up finding my dad recently, and my dad doesn't want anything to do with me. And that's okay.
Okay.
I'm fine with that, you know.
Mm.
And
His loss. I'll just say his loss.
yeah, but here's the thing though, is that I had to realize is that, he and my mom split up for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. It wasn't my marriage. But on top of that
Right.
though, he's been living his life for 40 years. He doesn't know me. I'm a stranger. And
Yes.
so for me to have such high expectations to want that relationship or want to know him and not respect that on the other side, he may not want to reciprocate that, it's setting me up for failure in a lot of ways to be very angry. And so I approached that situation with the one conversation I had with him over a messenger thing, and I said, he's just lived his own life and he's happy. He likes where he is, and I
Yeah.
don't need to. I don't need to hold any frustration over it. I don't need to be mad at him. I don't need to. Whatever happened, happened. But at least I know he's out there. I know who my dad is. And, if something comes of it, great. If not, that's okay. And that's where I hope that people that want to do DNA testing approach it like that. Give yourself the control, give yourself the decision power. You don't have
Right.
to do things, but leave yourself open that the opportunity might be there for something good.
Yes. Well, I always say, I guess another thing I would say, give yourself grace, and
Mm.
and grace for other people too, because like with your dad, I mean, we don't know what happened so often, and when nobody wants to talk about what happened, we're the kind of the person in limbo there, and it's I always I do write in the book too about don't go in. I probably did a little bit, like a bull in a china closet is always, but I didn't go in that fiery. I did not, and some people do, and you're the reaction. You're going to get a reaction, and it might not be the reaction that you want. I also say too, because Chris, you just made a really good point, is that maybe it's where your dad is now, or and maybe it changes, and so we see that a lot. We see that with somebody with this person never wanted to have anything to do, but all of a sudden the gears start shifting and things change, and then maybe they have a life changing experience, and or it happens to them, and they're going, wow. I mean, you begin to look at it differently. So I'm okay with not ever knowing my sisters. I truly am. I do have two cousins that I would still like to meet. I think they're good people. But it is their decision. I've placed myself in front of them, but if they decide not to, then they don't have to. But I still know over time, we're all still young enough. that that things do change and life changes, and so maybe they'll change their mind one day, and maybe they'll feel differently about it, and if they don't, that's okay too. But you know, I
I think that's the best place for us on how to work through those situations. I
yeah,
mean, I always say it's the duality of things. You can have both
yes,
outcomes in the same place. And I think
well,
that's a beautiful way that you said that. I wanted to, as we get closer to wrapping up the podcast, I
sure.
wanted to ask you about your book and when did you write the book and how did you come to that place of wanting to write it?
Well, I always say my catalyst, the line in the sand was the way that I was treated by my sisters.
Mm.
I it was a discovery aha moment for me. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a pretty strong-headed, strong-willed person. And if I were struggling with something like that, I knew there had to be so many people out there that were struggling. And I had a hard time finding support. You and I have talked about support systems. That was in I, I was at a point where I was like, I really felt like I was out there just I was flailing, trying to find information and just trying to put the pieces together. So that anyway, I lost my train of thought, but and I'm honest about it.
No,
But
it's okay. That happens sometimes. We're thinking
yeah,
about good things here. No,
yeah,
you
so
you were
yeah,
talking about learning how to write your book and figuring
right.
out that
Okay. Sorry.
process.
So yeah, that was my catalyst. Thanks for helping me, Chris. That was
No.
my catalyst of just saying I needed to do this. I needed to share my story. And many people don't want to talk about it. I did want to talk about it. I wanted to share my story. It had evolved over many years. It didn't happen overnight. But for me, when I sat down to really write the book, it was a healing process for me. The book has humor in it. It has funny stories in it. It has poetry in it. And when we just wrapped up the taping, it just went live on Audible last month, which I'm very excited about. And I think we did some extremely innovative things with it. But because I had the poetry in it, we were able to go back with the poems and add a dear friend of mine as a musician. He did the music for it. He donated his music for it. And so we took that music and we have it in the background of the poems. The reason I did poems and in several of the chapters too is because the poems kind of solidify what the chapter's talking about. And with my feelings and my emotions, but I get a lot of feedback about the poetry that it makes it fit together and pulls the feelings and the emotions back in with the chapters. But and I wanted the book to be different. It's not techie. It does talk a little bit about centimorgans, but I really did try to take real life situations like grieving. It is a grieving process going through these changes. But what does gaslighting look like? What does what does ghosting look like? I've been ghosted. Somebody will say, "Oh, I'll help you," and yes, send me the information, and then I don't get another word back from them. That was really important for me to take real life situations that we deal with, not just in DNA or the loss of a child or learning about people. It's not just about that. This is stuff that happens every single day in our relationships, and I wanted to address those things so that it wasn't just about DNA. It was about the journey of life and how do we use grace in helping ourselves, but in also, people helping each other.
That's really beautiful to have you write a book about that because the things you brought up too that we touched on a little bit today, the gaslighting, the ghosting, those are things that do happen out of these situations of life. They are. And ghosting's a hard one to deal with when people
Mm,
just they disappear, they're gone, and it's without any explanation or reason or rhyme or why. And you're always left there in that quandary all the time of did I say something? Did I do something? Is it me or is it something else? Is it something to do with them? And we never truly know. And that puts a
yeah.
little additional compound layer on top of what we're already dealing with.
Well, I think so. Because it's very hurtful. But I do talk about ghosting. There are times where you just need to disconnect from a person if they're being harmful or stalking you or being an issue. I mean, that's totally different from what we're talking about of being kind to another human being. And so I'm not a psychologist, but I did bring in information from psychologists and what this looks like and how it can make another human being feel. like you said, now you've just layered hurt upon hurt upon hurt, and people need to understand that they are responsible for that hurt if that's the way they handle the situation. So please don't do that. That's just not a nice thing to do to another human.
Yeah, and I want to ask you as we wrap up the podcast,
Mhm.
what is a centimorgan? I'm curious
Okay.
about what that means.
Okay, so briefly, just not be tech. So a centimorgan basically is the length in our DNA strands of how close we are to another person. So the larger the number, the closer you are genetically to that person. So I think you and I talked about it. So like a parent would be like a 3,600 if you look at your ancestry centimorgans or 23andMe. So, and then as if we were siblings, you and I would drop down from our parents. And if we were full siblings, our centimorgan with each other would be like 1,700 or 1,600. So the further you go away from genetically connected to someone, through the DNA strand, the smaller the number. So you have an uncle or an aunt, they'd be like a 1,600 or 1,700. So the centimorgan is just simply our distance in DNA with another person. Did you freeze on me, Chris? Oh, Chris, I lost you. Yes. Chris, are you there? You there?
I'm here. Zoom dropped us.
Oh, I was like, oh my gosh,
I'm
I guess we had a timeline and we missed it. So,
no, we're fine. Zoom has been doing this the last week. It drives me nuts.
okay.
I'm just gonna edit out this section of the podcast.
Okay. Well,
Um,
I didn't know. I was like,
let
well, I
me,
think we can get back in.
yeah, no, let me do this. I'm just gonna re-ask you what a centimorgan is so I can just
Okay.
kind of tie it together and then we'll just keep going like this didn't
Okay.
happen.
Okay.
And we'll get it wrapped up pretty quick.
Okay.
So Leslie, I'm really curious. Tell me more about what a centimorgan is.
Okay. So as we're talking about not being too techy on it, but a centimorgan is basically the distance on our DNA strand to another person. So, so the larger the number, the closer you are in relationship to that person. So we'll use our parents as an example. Both parents would probably be like in the centimorgan number, like a 3,600 or 3,700. Then you can look at your ancestry. I like it the way they do it. It's easy to see. But then, so like if you and I are brother and sister, full blood brother and sister, it would drop down from our parents. And so we would be like half that, 1,600, 1,700, something like that, around that. And then an uncle or an aunt would be the exact same. They would be the same because we're so close in proximity to them on the DNA strand. So the further away you get from someone in relationship on the DNA strand, the smaller the number. So you can, that's when you see something on your DNA testing and it's like 0.04, blah, blah, blah. That's a pretty distant cousin. So you're talking like
Okay.
fourth, fifth, sixth cousin. You probably share great grandparents. I mean, it can go back that, great grandparents. So somewhere in our lineage, we're feeding all into that strand, but the further away we are, then the lower the number. And a lot of people do not understand what a centimorgan is, but it's pretty simple, but it's just understanding it.
Yeah, it sounds really like a simple concept, but to apply it into your genealogy you pull up when you do the 23andMe type of ancestry report can really help you determine actually the closeness of that person on there. Because that was one of my other questions I had too. We'll wrap up after this, but I
Okay.
wanted to ask you about, when we are looking through these DNA reports, how accurate are those things, would you say, in your experience?
Ooh, well, now I think they're very accurate. It doesn't, the results just don't lie. They just don't. I mean, if you're coming up that strongly, if you, like I was saying, if you and I come up 1600, there's no way around the DNA testing that we're brother and sister. I mean, you just can't get away from it. When it gets further out on the Centimorgan, it could be, that's so weird because there's so many different levels that are dropping down and great grandparents and great great grandparents. But I always say facts don't lie. I mean, it is what it is, and the DNA testing is extremely it's spot on. And it's just very rare that you can argue it anymore. And I think in the past, maybe there were differences. The one thing now that we're seeing, though, in the DNA testing is the more people that get into the pool, the percentages change. And I'll give myself as an example. So when I first took it, 28% Scandinavian. But now, as more people are getting into that pool, my Scandinavian number has dropped. And that's not unusual. It's just that
Interesting.
more people taking the test, it does make changes within the percentage of what your lineage might be. And that's okay too. I have more friends that get upset because they find out they weren't 100% Italian, that kind of, that kind of pride of being, I'm 100% German when they find out that they're half French, half German. I mean, nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of funny to me because I'm a mix of a lot of different things. But I think if you take the test, you can trust it. I just it's hard. I think if you're American Indian, if you're Native American Indian and you're looking for Native American Indian results, don't be disappointed because that's a whole nother conversation. But there's a
Mm.
lot of scrubbing that's gone on with the American Native Indian DNA and lineage. So many people that think, oh, I'm a quarter Comanche or Cherokee. Don't be disappointed when you take the test and it doesn't show up that way. Because there's a whole nother thing that's going on with that in the DNA world. And we're finally starting to see a little bit of it show up, but it's there's reasons why they are not letting that show up, and it has to do with government funding and a lot of other things. And so I always get that people, I just don't believe it because I know I'm Native American Indian. Well, you probably are, but they're just not filtering that into the DNA test right now.
Well, I think that's the biggest challenge with these DNA companies like 23andMe is that everything's going off a database of how many people take this test, how many people
Right.
participate. And so when we really think about it in the bigger picture of things, 23andMe really is a very small sample size today compared to where they were even when they started. And
Exactly.
unless we were to get, roughly, I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world right now. So I'd say if you get at least 4 billion people to do that thing, which is a lot,
Mhm. Yeah.
our test results, like you said, are always going to skew and start moving around because the more people that participate actually make it more accurate for us. And
Yeah.
uh,
Well, it shifts the algorithms. And, I mean, and I will say on 23andMe, I mean, people knee-jerk react and start taking everything down off 23andMe. I always try to help people understand they already had your information. You took it down, you didn't take it down. The data's already out there. And that kind of frustrates people, but you're not if you've already put your DNA out there, it's probably still out there. But and many people started shutting down their account and doing all these things. Well, I mean, it is I do not like the term it is what it is, but it is what it is. It was out there, and that did not change the data. So is it looked at a little bit differently? Maybe so. I'm not a complete expert on 23andMe, but I also do know that she was able to take the company back over again, but one of the caveats was that she had to make it a nonprofit organization, nonprofit company. So,
um,
and yeah, she's smart. She knew what she was doing. It just got out of the realm of where she probably needed to be. So that's just that is an opinion. That's not a fact.
Well, Leslie, I just want to first off say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and talking about this subject of DNA testing and searching for our ancestral roots because it's a different wave of grief that comes across people nowadays with the use of our technology to understand our backgrounds better, understand who our tribe was and our family growing up and who's in our lineage. And I think that's a thing that's going to continue to grow and get more accurate as we head into the future. But I just want to say a big thank you for coming on the show today and
Oh,
sharing your experience with it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me tell the story and share the information. I enjoy doing it, and it seems to always help. If it just helps one person, then it's well worth it.
And I wanted to ask you too, for our audience listening today, if they want to connect with you after the story because they have questions or want to share their experiences, do you have a website or social media set up? And where can we find your book?
Yes. So the book is on Amazon and Kindle, and like I said, it's live on Audible. That So they can find it there. And so the actual title of the book is "If You Only Knew." And navigating DNA surprises and the NPE world, which stands for not parent expected. So they can purchase the book. They also can go to my website if they my phone number's out there. I'm not a big private person. I'm an open book, but my the website is just I am Lezlee. It's IAMLEZLEE. There's stories out there. I need to do some more blogging, but it's really my blog, and they can go on there and connect with me and share information, and I'm always happy to help. And if somebody emails me, then they can email me off that, and I'm always happy to respond and just share, not share, give advice, and help out any way I can.
Well, I think that sounds great. And for you guys listening today, I'll have Leslie's website address and the link to Amazon for her book in the show notes. When you guys get done listening to the episode, jump over there to connect with her. As you guys have seen today, she's a beautiful person that's not afraid to go down the
Thank
DNA
you.
path and figure out more aspects to her life and be very open to understand there may be other family out there we just don't know about that is willing to connect with us. So
Yes.
thanks again, Leslie.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you guys for joining Leslie and I on today's episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. If this conversation resonates with you, please share it with somebody you know who needs to hear this today. And if you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to move forward in your grief, you don't have to figure it out alone. I offer free grief clarity calls where we can talk through what you're experiencing, help you understand what's going on beneath the surface, and find a clear path forward. You guys can book that call at empoweredgriefjourney.com. You guys can also explore past episodes and subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Podbean so you never miss a conversation. The Empowered Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you guys to know you're never alone in this journey, and together we can navigate it with grief and courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.